All right. So just kind of starting off, going through basic things with formatting. We talked a little bit about this last week. And most of the formatting in Excel works very similarly to Word. You can do just about everything the same way with font up here in the corner, and you can get more options from this pop-up dialog box right here. And you can see this is where you get more effects like the strike through and the superscript and the subscript. And those you can see down here. I'll zoom in a little bit for you. We've got some superscripts here, subscript there, a few things crossed out down below. And if you want to apply any of these, this is how you would do it. You'd put in, say we're copying this line, we'd put in E equals MC and the 2, and then we'd take the 2. They don't have a little shortcut for it. There is a keystroke that you can use, but you'd hit the superscript, hit OK, and now it's up top. And you'd do the same thing for a subscript as well. 2O, highlight that 2, and go up here, pop up the dialog box, subscript. There we go. And this is helpful if you're trying to define variables too, depending on if you're writing equations out. Just something useful to keep track of. As you're going through, you can change all different things. Up here, this is italicized and bolded. I can take that off or put it on. Here, let me. The trick is to make sure you actually get the text and not just the cell, because sometimes that'll throw you off a little bit. If you just have the cell, it's formatting what will go into that in the future, but not the actual text that's in there at the moment. So now it's highlighted, and I can change all of these, maybe underline it. And you can see how that affects once you click outside. Something to keep track of too if you're using fonts in Excel, because typically you're using a combination of numbers and letters, is down here. If we look, let me zoom in just a little for you. It's really hard to tell which one is an L and which one is a 1. And so just want to be careful depending on what font you use. This is just one that happens to have that sort of feature. So this one ends up being the L. This one is the 1. You can see how that might be confusing as you're typing along. So you're writing the word shell. That still very much looks like the same word as that. So just be careful. And that's really kind of the basics of font. Over here are the defaults that Excel brings you, depending on which version you're using. And they just have a little bit of different sizing, which may be helpful depending on what you're doing or just how you want it to look. So just be aware of. For columns and rows, I have all these tabs up just because it helps me remember what I'm doing in each one. When you're formatting these, you might be tempted to try to drag them from here, but that can lead you into some troubles. It might accidentally copy and paste things where you don't want to, because that's the shortcut in Excel. You want to do all your column formatting from up here. So say we wanted these to be a little bit bigger. We could do it like this, one at a time, and it gives us the dimensions where it says width 11.89 and then how many pixels. That's one way to do it. Another way, say we want these all to be the same size, you can highlight all of them and then drag one, and you're always going to click on the border, and you might drag it this way. And now it'll snap all of them to the same size. So if I zoom out a little bit now, you can see they're all pretty big, and they're all probably a little bit too big. And if you have something set up like this and you want it to snap it to be the right size to fit it exactly, what you can do is where we were clicking on that border to drag it around. If you double click, that'll make that border snap automatically to the data inside it. And you can do this for a whole set as well. We can do this for the whole section, double click, and now it's all snap fit together. So we can zoom in a little bit more again. And notice up here, this line, this is what's considered a merged cell. So this says A1 in the name box up here, so we know that it was input into A1, but there's no, if we say tab over, it goes straight from A1 to J1. That's because all of these are now considered part of A1. And so it isn't affected when we make these changes to these other cells. It might get a little smaller in total, but it itself doesn't really change. And you notice when I made this one smaller, we got these funny little pound symbols in place of the number. And that's just Excel's way of saying, hey, there's a number here, but we didn't have enough room to show it. And then you can do the double click and it'll reveal it for you. So those are kind of the basics of moving around your rows and your columns. If you want to select all of them at once, you can do it right here. And you can do this with your rows too. I was just showing with columns because I think that's a little more common. But you could do this, and now they've all been moved together. And you can also use this feature for aligning them together. So this is called middle align. Normally in Word, say you'd have center, left, right, maybe. And in Excel, you also have the options for top, bottom, and middle. So here, now they're all lined up to the middle. So you can have all kinds of combinations of these depending on how you want it to look. We can make that smaller again. So that's just kind of the basics of rows and columns. Kind of back to that idea of merged cells. Here's a version. Oh, I had been playing with it a little bit. So I'll have to undo what I did there. I had merged these ahead of time, just making sure that it was going to work for today. So the way these start is you type them into whatever cell you're in. So say we're starting in this A1, we type in this sales and profits, title, hit enter, and you can see it doesn't really fit in the cell. And something you could do is pull it out, but now this whole column's really big and maybe we wanted it centered over everything anyway. So in this case, we would use that merge function. And so we can have it go all the way out to I. So we'd highlight all the way there and then select this merge and center. And that works really well. If you say want to do that with both of these lines, you might think that you can get them all together at once. And that would kind of make sense, but unfortunately what it does is it throws up this error because it's trying not only to merge all the columns together, but also both of those rows, and it will get rid of this text over here if we do that. So we can hit cancel and do this trick instead, where we select this, and we could just go one at a time, or you can hold down the Control key. And this is a handy feature in Excel. Using Control and holding down lets you make a second selection at the same time. And this is helpful when you're picking data for charts or for functions and you need to grab another section of data. But it works here too, and then we click Merge and Center and it does it for both of the lines for us. So now looking into the next little tab for borders, say we want to put this all the months in a border. What we could do for that is right up here, this is the border tool. And so we could just click that and it puts in a border for us. And we could change the way that looks with a little drop down arrow. We could change the line color. We could even draw the border in if we wanted. Say we wanted lines between the days. We could stick those in with this little pencil tool. They're kind of hard to see, but sometimes it's a little more intuitive to be able to put it in yourself. And you can also go to more borders, which brings up this dialog box, and it gives you all of these different style options, the color options, and also options as far as where they go. You can even have it kind of cross through cells if you want. So let's say we were to do these inside lines and say we wanted them dashed. Click that, hit OK. And now we have this little dashed lines on the inside. So just something to play around with. It works the same way as in Word, and if you're looking for these more options and you kind of forget, you can always click this, and it gives you those font options, the alignment options, and over here the border options. And that can be pretty helpful. And then the next one I was going to talk about is numeric formatting. And we talked about this a little bit last week when we were doing some formulas, and it was bringing us an answer that was formatted as a date, and we needed it as a number, and so we could change what it was set as up here. This number formatting allows for different types of different types of formulas to happen in Excel. In this case, what we have is general. So we're in C3, and it just is set as a normal sort of entry. Everything kind of defaults to that. When you put in a formula, sometimes it tries to automatically select what it is, such as when we type in dates and it says, oh, this is a date. I know what to do. It did that here. So in this worksheet, it has social security numbers that were randomly generated and phone numbers that were randomly generated, but they're not formatted correctly. But what we can do is tell Excel what kind of number it is, and it'll do it for us. And this works for just about anything. So we could click here, get the whole column, and it shows these little symbols up here. And these can be handy, but these aren't the ones that we want. This just moves the decimal place over. It gives it a comma format. Percent tells you what kind of money system to use if you're doing something with that. So we want to go into something a little bit more complicated. We'll open the dialog box and see all of the different options. And sometimes it's fun to just click through these and see what options are available, because there really are a lot and they can be pretty useful depending on what you're doing. And as you're going through, eventually we'll get to special and see this is where social security number is listed. It also has zip code and phone number, so we'll use that again for the phone numbers. But all you have to do is click it, click OK. And remember, this was the formatting that it gives to say there isn't enough space to show the numbers, so we'll double click the border so it'll automatically fit it. And now they're all in with the appropriate hyphens. And for the phone numbers, we'll do the same thing. We'll select the whole column, go over here, go to Special, click Phone Number, and click OK. Double click the border up top, and now we can see the whole phone number, and it's formatted with the area codes. And so say we were trying to mess with these dates. Right now, they're set all to be numbers, but we can change that pretty easily doing the same thing. We could go to Date and tell it we actually want the whole date, the day of the week included, and we could click that, and we would see that, and that probably isn't important in this sort of table, but it's just interesting to play with these different ones and see what works best depending on what kind of data you're working with. And so with these salaries, same sort of thing. We can go in and we can even just click this shortcut here, and we can say, okay, this is English dollars, and we're doing this in an accounting format. So that's how it'll bring that up just by default. Say we don't want those zeros after, what we can do is we can decrease the decimal, and that just did it for one cell, so we'd want to click the whole thing. Maybe we'll hit undo there, click the whole thing, and now we don't have those hanging decimals. So that's a handy way of just working with these. If say you wanted something like this has some negative numbers, which could be tricky to work with in that same sort of format. Could go in, it puts it in parentheses to show that it's negative. And there's different ways that we could format that. And we'd go to here again, go to accounting, or perhaps currency. Okay. So let's say we want the negative numbers to be in red as well so that we can see it. We'll hit OK. And now it's a little bit clearer who has account balances that are in the negatives. So that's just a good trick for when you're trying to make your numbers look the way you want them to. Really keep track of this one. So if you have a formula that spits out a number that doesn't look right, it might just be in the wrong format. And you can adjust it up here. So the next one I was going to talk about, because we already looked at date and time, was conditional formatting. And conditional formatting is pretty cool. What it does is it allows you to apply formatting depending on values. So that's also located on the Home tab, and it's over here right next to Format as Table. So this whole section has been formatted as a table. It doesn't have to be for this to work. And what we could do is say we're looking at all of these compensations, and maybe we want to be able to see which ones are the highest, for instance, really easily. And right now it has a normal sort of table format with the banded rows. So let's click on this and let's change just this one column. We'll click Conditional Formatting, and they have all these different ways to indicate data that's different. You can have it highlight cells that are bigger than certain values, and it really walks you through it, which is helpful. You can have it do kind of these top-bottom rules. So maybe we want to see the top 10% highlighted. This one's pretty interesting. This is called a data bar, and what it does is it puts a little graph relative to all the other values in that column. This one's maybe not as intuitive what it looks like, so if you hover over it, you get a chance to sort of see. And in this case with the green, you can see the lower salaries have these little bars, the higher salaries have higher bars. And that can be helpful, especially if, say, we're doing, let's make it something that'll stand out. That's pretty good at standing out. If we go to that conditional formatting, click the Manage Rules, this gives us a little bit more options. We could say, okay, this applies to this column. We could also add another column if we wanted to. Here, we could click on Job Rating, hit Apply, hit OK. Oops, didn't quite do that. Might be easier just to go through it this way too. That's probably the easiest way. What I was trying to do is I was trying to find the button that allows you to show these data bars, but without the numbers inside. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Because that's one way to show relative data without showing. Here we go. So that's what I had to do. I had to go to more options. Let's see, it was this, the color bar scales, excuse me, data bars. Then I went to more rules. There we go. So here's the option to show bar only. We can hit OK. It got rid of the other formatting that I had just because those weren't the defaults there. But now you can see it without the numbers. So maybe you're showing information that maybe you don't want people to know the exact numbers, but you can show kind of relatively what they are. So let's undo that. Another way to do that is with these color scales. These ones are pretty nice. They kind of give this gradient color. And so you can see the darker it is, the higher it is. And that's a kind of an easy way to show right off the bat what's going on. Just to kind of explain the rules a little more, let's undo that, Control Z. We'll go to data bars. Let's say highlight, here we go. Let's do, maybe we're worried about people who have salaries less than 30,000. So we'll put less than, and then you can type in the number. Click OK. And now it'll show those in a different color. There's only a few. But that's just a handy way to kind of make your formatting really specific to what you're looking for so different data stands out. The option where it has highlight cell rules equal to, this is handy not only for numbers, but let's say we're looking for just the IT people. So we could click on this department, put conditional formatting. Maybe we want them to be a different color. Go to highlight cell rules equal to, and we can just type in IT, and you can say what you want it to fill with. Maybe we want green fill of dark green text. We'll hit OK. And now we can see our IT personnel. And this is a good way to kind of keep that data around without having to filter it, which is something that having tables can do, which is pretty handy. And that's what we're going to talk about next. This is the same sort of data, just without the table formatting put in. And what you'll do for it, I'm scrolled all the way down to the bottom, but I'll scroll back up. And you can see we have our headings up here, all of our people, all of our different columns. And what we can do to do these tables is just click anywhere. Excel's really good at figuring out where the boundaries of your data are. And we would go to Insert, and Table is right here. And it'll ask you what the boundaries are just to make sure. And if you're not confident that that's what you want, you can say, okay, it's going down to 742. Is that the end of my data? I hit OK. Didn't mean to. We'll go back. Control period is a way to move around. Let me see. Usually it works. Sometimes it's a bit of a pain for me. All right, it's not working for me today, but we can scroll down and take a peek at the bottom of our data set and say, okay, yep, it is at 742. That's correct. That's what we want. So click, Insert, Table, and you can change these too. You can also select the data as well. Say you didn't want it this way, you could delete it. And then you could highlight the data that you wanted to. Say you just wanted this section. But we do want the whole thing. So the easiest way for me is to get that, hit Table. You want to make sure that my table has headers. If it does, make sure that's selected, hit OK. And now it's all set up into this table formatting. And you can change the way this looks. You can get rid of the banded rows if you want. Sometimes it's just easier to read. You can get rid of that header row if you wanted, but you can come right back to. Let's say down at the bottom, let's see. Let's just imagine for a minute that we had a total row. Say this was a sum. We did this function last week. Up here, click on that. Let's see if it'll, yeah, it doesn't want to do that for me because I'm in the same row. But if I could select all of this after I do it, we'll do equals sum, select it all. And we can keep working, hit enter. And there we go, there's a sum. Now you can see the table under this design tab has already created this total row for us. And we can turn it off if we want to. And if you're trying to put in a new row at the bottom of your table, typically what you'll do is you'll right click on your row, insert, or inserted a row above. We maybe don't want that. The easiest way, here, this has been a bit since I've done this, so what you want to do is get rid of the total row, and then you can add more options. So now I can click insert and it gives me the option to put a row below. And granted, there's no data in there. It just has years that it automatically filled in for some reason. Oh, I see. It's copying a formula down. So that's handy too. When you make a table, it copies the formula into each row. So then we could turn our total row back on, click in the table, click the total row, and it'll pop it in there. And if I added this, let's say this is just simply 50,000, hit enter, it automatically updates down below too. So that's something useful of tables. It knows what things are connected and it'll automatically update those for you. Kind of going along the same line, something else that's useful about organizing your data this way is it gives you the option to use these filters. Say you only want to look at people who are in the main building. You can click on this little drop down and it gives you the options to sort them. That's really helpful too. And you can just click on the ones that you want. You can deselect, select all, then select main only, hit OK. And now we're only seeing people who work in the main building. And you might notice, and it's kind of hard to see on the side, look how these numbers go. They go 1, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 20. What's really happening is Excel is automatically hiding certain rows and columns when you do this. In this case, it's just rows. And if you wanted to see what's in between, you can double click that. And it'll open that back up again. So it's a little bit funny the way it chooses to organize its data. Here we go. Can pull 7 down. Whoop. There we go. You'd have to pull them all out one by one if you want to do that. But you could also click here, and what it's called is hiding. Let me see. Maybe I have to right click here. Oops. I'm not sure what I clicked. This is the magic of Excel. I have no idea what I did, and that was very bizarre. So I'm going to hit undo. Undo is my best friend. So anyway, that was a fun feature I didn't think I would be showing today. But anyhow, hiding is what allows for this to happen. Another way to do this, so we did this by building. We can hit select all. Now we see everybody again. Maybe we want these all to be the same size again. So we can click up here, double click. Now they're all back to normal. What we can do is insert a thing called a slicer tool. And this one is pretty cool. You go to insert, go over to these filters options and click slicer. And you can tell it for which categories, which headings you want to put a slicer in for. So let's say we wanted to do one for the building type and for perhaps the department. Those would probably be the ones that make the most sense here. So you can hit OK. And it gives these little pop-up boxes to you. And you can move them around, resize them however you see fit. Let's zoom out a bit so that we can see it okay. Can cover up things too if you're not too worried about that. And if you're thinking, okay, I have to scroll through all this, maybe I don't want it to look like that, something you can do is change it so that it's in columns. Let me see. There should be a way to do that. Slicer settings, that's not it. How'd it work in the everyday? Right click. Not quite seeing it. This is the option to select multiple things. It works just like a filter. So what you can do is you can select, say you want to see the folks in IT and in human resources. Now I have both of those deselected. Let's clear the filter. I want IT, human resources. There we go. Click that. Boom. There's everybody in both those departments. It works kind of like a little on-off toggle, and it can be a little bit more intuitive depending on how you feel about filters. And say we can run 2 of these at once, so we want to see just the folks in those departments who work in the main building. I can just click main. And the ones that are highlighted are now the ones that are being shown. And once again, it's doing the same thing. It's hiding all these different rows. And if you want to get rid of these, just hit clear filter. And then if you say, I just don't want these slicers altogether, just select it so that you see all the dots around it, click delete, and it'll go away. So those are pretty useful depending on what you're trying to do. Say you were trying to really figure out who in the job ratings was a 5 or a 4. You could insert the slicer, tell it you wanted just job rating, hit OK, and say just 4s, and say you want to select multiple ones, then also select 5s. And now you can see all of those. Just another handy trick that they put in for you.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Sure, Andrea. I'd love to hear a question.
Do you have to have a pivot table set up to use the data slicer, or can it slice if you don't have a pivot table set up?
Sure. So that's a great question, and it depends on which version of Excel you're using. The slicer tool was introduced, oh gosh, I think it was in 2013. It became available for all tables. Yes. So any version after 2013, anything that's a table, it doesn't have to be a pivot table, can have a slicer tool. So this is just a normal table. It does not have, I could turn it into a pivot table, but it isn't at the moment. 2010 was when they introduced it, and then it was only available for pivot tables. So if you have a version from between 2010 and 2013, then it will only work with a pivot table. But anything since then, Microsoft 365, or in this case, this is 2016, it'll work for any table that you create. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And but it couldn't just be sort of any column of data, and it has to recognize it as set up as a table in the design.
Yes, yes, that is correct. It does have to have it as a table. If I was just in, let's say I hadn't put this as a table yet, let's get rid of the table formatting. Table, convert to range. Whoops, cancel. Nope. Let's see if I can get rid of this whole table format real quick. Let's select all, design. Nope, that's not what I want.
You set up such a nice tutorial. Now I'm making you break it apart.
No, you're good. You know, it's funny. I have like this planned script that I'm like, okay, I know I got this all set up. It's all gonna work. Let's see. Yeah, I haven't actually moved data from a table to just normal values. And so I'm actually struggling to figure out how to do that. If I
Yeah,
was
no. Go ahead.
curious, what I'd do is I would say remove table, see what it tells me I can do. Let's see. Let's see what Excel thinks I can do. Moving rows, delete a pivot table. That's funny. It does not have an easy shortcut for that.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, no
Oh
worries at
yeah,
all. And yeah,
no,
thank you.
no trouble. What I'm thinking, so if I were to go to insert, the shortcut for insert table is Control T. I wonder if I hit Control T with all this, no, doesn't do it. Yeah, I'm not sure if they have a good way to revert it back. But what I would do if I had to is I would select all of this, select the whole table. Let me see if I can get the whole table. Let's see, maybe down here. Yeah, no, that's just formatting. What I would do is I would copy it, honestly, set it up, go over here, right next to it, click in the box, and I would go to File, not File, Home, Paste, and there's an option. You can see there's a ton of paste options in Excel, and there's one that is just paste as a value, paste values. So let's say I want no formatting, just the value. Now I have it back. So if I had it like this, it would not let me insert a slicer. Let me see, because it'll probably try to apply it to this. Let's click in here, delete that. Now let's see, slicer. Yeah, it can't find anything to connect with. So no, that's a great question. Hadn't thought to explore that, but I was pretty sure it wouldn't work for just normal values. So now we know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was kind of my review for formatting. I was going to go into a little bit with layout, so I got to share a different screen. Let me bring that up. Show all windows. It's hidden here. Here we go. Nope. It's pretty similar little doodad. But so for layout, what I wanted to talk about a little bit was just how to move about the worksheet. And when you're doing this is where hiding data comes in handy for printing and things like that. Sometimes you may just not want to see a particular column. Say this compensation column you didn't want everybody in the world to be able to see. You can right-click above the column, click Hide, and now you can see how it compresses it here. This is what we were seeing before with the filters. Just a useful tool to kind of get rid of certain rows that maybe you don't want to see. Maybe we don't want to see this one either. Can hit Hide. And you can open them up either by dragging these, well, clearly not by that one. You really got to get in between and pull them open. So it's a little bit tricky to grab on. But what you can do is click unhide, and right now they are unhidden. So I'll hit Control Z, right click in that spot, click unhide, and it'll pop them out. And they're not quite the right size, so what I would do is I'd highlight these, double click on maybe this one, and now it'll snap them. Now I can get them back to a normal size. This one's still a little bit funky, so I'll double click. So that's a good trick for hiding and unhiding data. If you want to kind of know how it's going to look when you go to print something, these little tools down here are really helpful. This is your page break preview. This is my favorite one for looking at this. And you can see this is a huge document. And if we went to print it, it would have all kinds of crazy pages. It would be trying to print these utterly blank ones as well, because it has data up here. And so what you can do is you can select a whole section. If this isn't important for the print, right click, go to that hide option, and now it's not going to try to print those. So we can zoom in a bit now, take a peek, maybe hide these two again. And now everything would fit into one page, at least going across. And that would be pretty helpful for us. We can see where it breaks up after there. Another thing that we can do, these columns don't even have data, so we could hide those as well. And then we could say unhide these ones, compensation, and the benefits one. And maybe if we wanted, we could move this little blue bar over if we still had stuff going on over here. Hit unhide. Just some useful tricks. So see how there's this dark blue line and this dashed blue line? We can drag it and it'll automatically cut off that data when it goes to print. Just a useful tool. If we go back to this grid mode, it hasn't changed anything actually about the document. It only applies for when it prints. So one way to check how it'll print is go to File, go to Print. It'll make this preview, and it says 17 pages. That sounds pretty reasonable considering. And it doesn't have all of those hanging columns around. Can go back. But just some useful things when you're playing with the layout to try to make everything look right, because printing in Excel can absolutely be a pain. Just a couple other things when you're working with data. Let's say you wanted to move and copy and insert stuff. Let's see, where's a good set of text to do? Oops, let's see. All right, so let's say we wanted to copy perhaps our, this only goes till June. Maybe we wanted to do a similar sort of thing from July through August. And maybe we know that the second half of the year is just about the same. What we could do, select all of this, and you could just go to copy and paste. Another way to do it, say you're just cutting it, you want to move it around. Maybe you wanted this above this one. You could, excuse me, just grab it, highlight what you wanted, and then click on the border, and then just pull it down. And then you could pull this up. And this is just handy if you're kind of just moving things around as blocks. You can just slide them about however you want. Just got to make sure you click on that upper edge when you're moving things. So say we want to do all of this again. We would do copy or Control C depending on what's easier for you. You can see it gets this little dashed line around it. And go down below. And here you can do, this is where all those different paste options are important. If you paste by default, it'll keep all the formulas. Everything will be interlinked in the same way as it was before. Here, this really keeps track of the formulas and it gets rid of all the formatting. This has formatting and formulas. This has all, yeah, you can see there's just a lot of different options. You can be really selective about which formatting you keep and which formatting you get rid of. You can go to just paste the numbers alone as well. This is handy. There's some formulas. I was playing with this yesterday that create, say, a random number generator, but that random number generator refreshes the random number every single time you do anything else on the screen. So every time you hit save, it gets a new set of numbers. So usually what I have to do using that is generate the random numbers, then copy the values and just paste them so it doesn't try to do that with the formula every time. In this case, we want all the same formatting, all the defaults, so we just hit paste. And now we could change these around. We'd probably want to delete this, make it July, and then we could pull it across and autofill those. And then we would put in our new numbers. Maybe this is 140. And you can see it's fixing it all for us, 160. Everything else is linked, and so we don't have to worry about the copy and paste ruining that for us. Makes it really handy if you've got all your formulas set up and you don't want to have to do it all over again. So that was what I was kind of going to show with layout. And then, so we have a little bit of time left. What I wanted to show were some charts. Charts are probably my favorite thing to do in Excel, but they can definitely be tricky. I'm going to bring up my chart screen. Boop. I think this is the right one, right here. Okay. So making charts is pretty straightforward. There's some easy ways to do it and there's some more complicated ways to do it. And I think we'll probably keep talking about this next week just because we're running shorter on time to really go into it. And working with charts really has a lot to do with how the data gets inserted into the formulas that make the chart. So typically, you'd go to Insert, and here you can see all these recommended charts and then just all of them in general, and you can open that up. Oops. Requires me to be clicked somewhere. You can go to All Charts, and you can see there are tons of different options. And if you know what you want right away, that can be helpful. If not, you can look through them and see what they're showing and see which makes the most sense for your data, for what you're working with. So in this case, we're looking at these home product sales. We only have one set of numbers, so we don't want anything like a scatter plot which compares two variables. So perhaps what we want to figure out is what percentage of total profits is coming from each of these. So what we can do is click into data and think, okay, maybe a bar chart, maybe that would be useful. And you can hover over it and it'll show you roughly what that will look like. So in this case, it's not showing a percentage, it's showing just the amounts in these different categories. And it's a pretty useful visual way of seeing it. And let's just have it like this for a minute so we can look at what exactly it's doing. So if we go to Select Data, that gives us a chance to see kind of inside what Excel is doing to make this chart for us. So right here, it has the data source. It has its range, and you can see the range selected in that whole dashed moving line. And then where it says your legend entries and series, you can see it's automatically pulling that from the left-hand column. And then on the right-hand side, the horizontal, it has the axis categories. So those are the, those are your far left column entries. And then over here, let's see, if we were to edit it, we can see it's pulling, okay, it says B1, B2. That's the series name. Down here, it says B3 through B9. Here, B3 through 9. That gives you a good visual. So say you want to recreate this on your own, we can hit just OK, hit OK. You can also start with a blank chart. Let's click outside of the chart, go to Insert, insert a bar chart, 2D, and you can see it's totally blank. It has nothing going on, but we can click Select Data. The data range is coming from all of this, and it automatically grabs that for us. Now, if we don't fill that in, we can remove that. We can add the data series in. It doesn't really matter what its name is. This will just be the name across the horizontal. We can just say item. Actually, perhaps we want here to be total. And down here, we'd clear this because it's going to be equal to, and select all of this. So it's not pulling the right names, but that's okay. We can still see that it has pulled the correct relative amounts. So this is where it should have the correct names. We want to edit that, and we know the labels are going to be these guys. We'll hit OK, hit OK. And you can see, for the most part, it's made exactly the same graph, just two different methods to get there. And if you're working on formatting these, they format in pretty much the same way. What you can do is you can double click on any element of the chart. So you could double click on these bars, you could double click on the text. You could change the whole style just by doing this. Sometimes that can be useful, sometimes it can be a little bit much, depends on what you're doing. So let's say we want different vertical values. So we could maybe double click on this. We can say, okay, now it's telling us what the minimum is, what the maximum is. Maybe we don't want it to go all the way up there. We don't have anything that goes above 6. We can change that. And maybe we want this to be a little bit finer. Maybe we want this to be maybe 500,000 as opposed to 1,000,000. It might be a little bit tight, but let's just see how it looks. Okay, it is a little tight, but it gives us a bit better of an idea of exactly where everything goes. And we can change this too. Here it has automatic, it's giving us the entryway. We could show a value if that was applicable to this. We could also edit the order of these, and this really just depends on what sort of graph you're working on. On the same line, this is the format axis. It also gives us access to the labels here, and it automatically puts it next to the axis, but we could change that. We could put it above, we could put it below it. Let's put it above it. Let's see, okay, it's moved it to the side. So you can just play with these and see what happens and get different formats. You can always reset it too. Let's reset this one because that was a little busy. So let's close that out. It automatically keeps all those changes. Up here, say we wanted to change this title. We clicked it once, now it's selected. Click it again, now we can get in there and type home product sales, total. Let's maybe not need the word total. There we go. That looks pretty good. And so maybe we want labels on these axes. What we can do is go to this add chart element, and it gives us all the different options of things that might be on this chart. Some charts will need a legend, some will need a trend line. You can even add things like an R² value to show how good a fit is, error bars depending on what you're working with. In this case, we want a label, not a data label, not a chart title, axis title. Here we go. So we can put in that. I usually like to put in all the things that I want and then I type it in afterwards. So now this is, I can highlight the whole thing, put in department over here, select that. We can put in total sales. And there's different things that we can do to format this too. So we're in, let's click outside for a minute. Now click back. We're in the title options. We can give it a fill. We can give it a border. Usually it has an option handy that lets you rotate it around. That's what I'm looking for. So I think maybe we want this text option. Nope, that's not quite right. So maybe we have to format the axis too. Let's maybe try, what did we do? We're in labels. Let's position it next to the axis. Let's close that out, see if maybe that lets us. Either way, we get to move these around however we want. And I think what we could do is double click, go into format, and then we could edit it in here too. That might be an option for us. We could definitely change the text color this way. Make it blue or something. But that's just kind of an overview, and we can go more into charts next week too, because there's all kinds of different charts that we can use, and they're all useful for different things. So we've got 5 minutes left. Are there any questions? I think, Andrea, I think you might be the last one around. Do you have any questions that you'd like me to kind of go into a little bit more before we close out?
So much. This is awesome. Sorry, turning my camera on. So I guess for me, conditional formatting is new to me, and the slicer, that was all pretty new. So I don't know if circling back there or just tips for sort of if someone's new to that, things to play around with. But this was really great, really helpful.
Sure.
And yeah.
Yeah, and there are a few more things that I could show, especially the conditional formatting. So here I'll go back to that screen real quick and show you what we've got here. Let's open that back up. Here we go. All right. Right here, this tab. Yeah, so conditional formatting has another really cool option. And that's if you select it and then you go to, let's go back to home. Here we go, conditional formatting. And this actually does not have to be in a table. We can go to, say, this where it's just normal data. We could select this column and we could apply conditional formatting to it too. So this is not table specific, just make sure that's clear. What we can do is go to conditional formatting. Say we wanted something like that color scale, but we wanted different options. We could go here, go to those more rules. We have it selected as color scale, but you can also go to type lowest value, can change what that is, change what this is. So maybe this is maybe a percent. Maybe this is a percent. And you can change the value. So maybe these are ranging from 0 to 100%. Or maybe you only care about the top 50%. So you could go from 50 to 100 and that would show. And you can say, okay, I want this to be the lighter color. You can select maybe this light purple. I want this to be the darker color. Select this dark purple. You could hit OK there. These aren't percent, so that won't really help us, but we'll just go to lowest value to highest value and see how that shows. And that's what that'll end up looking like. If we clear that formatting, there's another option too. We'll clear rules. Clear rules from selected cells. We can go up here, and this is icon set, and this is pretty interesting. This one is kind of This one's new to me in general. And what it allows you to do is select different icons to appear next to the data when it exceeds a certain value. So in this case, this is under job rating. Maybe we want 5s, 4s, and 1s to be obvious. So they have these different styles. This is kind of like stoplights, little flags, arrows, things like that. Maybe we want to use these stars. This is probably the one that would make more sense. And they don't have a ton of options, but they have several. So let's say we click those. And it gives you these options to insert the rules. So they have a greater than or equal to. Here, this isn't really a percent. We just want the number. And we can change this to just greater than. But in this case, there's nothing greater than 5, so we'll just put in 5. This one, this can be for folks that are between 1 and 5. So probably greater than or equal to, we'll put in a number again. We would say greater than or equal to 3. And then we'll hit OK. And we can get rid of the icons too, and just sort of, get rid of the numbers as well and just show the icons. So we could hit OK. And now instead of seeing the job rating as a function of a number, it shows these icons instead. And that can be just kind of a handy trick depending on what you're working on. And it really just depends. So that was just one more thing that I hadn't shown was how the icons work, because those are kind of interesting.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot. This is
Yeah,
awesome. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. I hope you have a great day and hope to see you next week. I'm going to pause the recording. And